Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at what is honestly one of the most massive historical chain reactions in human history, the year 1492. It wasn't just a date on a calendar, It was literally the first domino in a sequence of events that would completely, fundamentally reshape the globe. But what actually happened after that fateful year? When Christopher Columbus inadvertently stumbled upon the Americas, getting spectacularly lost while looking for a faster route to India, by the way, he didn't just discover land, he opened up this restless, rapidly expanding Europe to a vast new frontier. Millions died, empires clashed, and the modern world as we know it was forged right in the fire of this collision. Okay, let's dive into this. Today we're going to cover before and beyond 1492, the European scramble, first permanent footprints, the tragic human cost, and finally, the birth of a nation. Part 1. Before and beyond 1492, the pre-existing world. First off, it's absolutely crucial to acknowledge that the North American continent was definitely not some empty wilderness waiting to be found. It was already home to incredibly complex Native American societies that had been governing the land for thousands of years. And hey, here's a fun fact. Columbus wasn't even the first European to make landfall. No way. Nearly 500 years earlier, the Norse navigator Leif Erikson established a brief settlement up in Labrador called Lance o' Meadows. But because that settlement was eventually abandoned, it really was Columbus's 1492 voyage that acted as the true inciting incident for global colonization. All right, moving on to part 2, the European scramble, carving up a continent. The 16th century kicked off an absolute frenzy. Just look at how this maps out the rapid land grab. You've got Spain claiming Florida in the south with Ponce de Leon, France is pushing up the St. Lawrence River with Cartier, England is staking its claim on the east coast with Cabot. What you're seeing here is literally the carving up of a continent via maps drawn in fancy European palaces, completely ignoring the native populations who were, already living there. And the naming of this territory itself, totally born out of commerce. The New World became known as America, named after the Florentine explorer Amerigo Vespucci. Why him? Well, simply because he created and sold maps of his discoveries. Suddenly, it was open season for explorers and businessmen, all looking to strike it rich and maybe find a faster route to India. Which brings us to part 3. First permanent footprints, struggle and survival. Now, claiming land on a map is one thing. Actually surviving there is a whole different ballgame. Just look at the extremely creepy fate of the lost colony of Roanoke. By 1590, an entire English settlement had just vanished. Poof. Leaving only the letters CRO and the word Croatoan carved into a piece of wood. The settlers were never found. Actually, it was Spain who achieved the first permanent European settlement in North America, establishing St. Augustine, Florida, way back in 1564. When the English finally did manage to stick around, it was through 2 iconic yet wildly different settlements. You've got Jamestown in 1607, driven purely by the financial motives of the London Company. Contrast that with Plymouth in 1620, founded by Puritans and pilgrims seeking religious freedom. The crucial takeaway here, despite having totally different motivations, both of these groups endured devastating winters, disease, and starvation, and they both survived only through the absolute crucial aid of local native tribes, the Powhatan for Jamestown and the Wampanoag for Plymouth. Let's turn to part 4, the tragic human cost, disease, displacement, and slavery. We have to impartially look at the severe, frankly devastating consequences of this colonial boom. Building this new global economy required a staggering human toll. First contact brought widespread disaster for indigenous peoples. Native populations were completely decimated by European diseases like smallpox, to which they had zero immunity. And this was just compounded by violent displacements, broken treaties, and the fact that European tensions constantly bled over, forcing native tribes into these devastating proxy wars just to defend their shrinking homes. And this brilliantly, or rather darkly, illustrates the grotesque economic engine of the era, the triangle trade. Enslaved Africans were captured and brought to the Americas under horrific conditions. The agricultural wealth they were forced to produce, things like sugar, was shipped up to New England. New England then traded rum and other goods back to Africa to purchase even more enslaved people. It was this ever-expanding, highly profitable cycle built entirely on human suffering. 2 million. I just want to pause on that number for a second. Between 1751 and 1775, the number of enslaved people imported to the Americas skyrocketed from 300,000 to over 2 million. It's a staggering figure. To put that into perspective, it represents this vast, involuntary workforce that quite literally built the entire economic foundation of the New World. Following this progression, we can see how this era escalated into massive geopolitical conflicts. North America basically became a giant battlefield for European powers and their native allies. From the intense bloodletting of King Philip's War in 1675, right through to the French and Indian War in 1754. These century-long proxy wars ultimately pushed Native Americans further and further out, permanently securing English dominance over the continents. Finally, Part 5. The Birth of a Nation, a Fracture in the Empire. So, that English dominance, which was finalized by their victory in the 7 Years' War, was actually the final domino. The British victory secured North America, leading to a massive colonial population boom. But the British government was left heavily in debt. So, what do? They levy heavy taxes on the colonies to pay for it, like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act. They also drew up the 1763 Proclamation Line, forbidding colonists from settling the western land they had just fought for. The colonists, who viewed themselves as loyal subjects, were outraged. The rallying cry became no taxation without representation, which boiled over into the 1770 Boston Massacre, the 1773 Boston Tea Party, and led directly to the shot heard around the world at Lexington in 1775. What started as a localized rebellion over taxes and rights morphed into a full-fledged revolution. On July 4, 1776, Thomas Jefferson's profound words in the Declaration of Independence, stating that all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, gave the colonists a unified ideological cause. They were now fighting to become a sovereign nation. After years of brutal warfare and with some absolutely crucial aid from the French, the revolutionary forces secured victory, culminating in the 1783 Treaty of Paris and the official birth of the United States. Which leaves us with a really profound question to wrap up our explainer today. This massive, continent-spanning chain reaction that began back in 1492 resulted in a powerful new nation. But it was a nation built simultaneously on the absolute highest ideals of liberty and the devastating realities of displacement and slavery. So as we look at the history that followed, we have to ask, can a giant built on such immense ideals, yet wrestling with such profound contradictions, continue its dominance and endure? Think about it. Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the history that shaped our world.